Hey, this is Bradley with Blue Cord, and based on past videos and interactions with all my fans out there, they recommended that I make comparisons between the Tough Cut and the Flail. The camera's crooked. Why are you crooked? So I could go one better, and I could even include the finish cut mower that I have that has the 6-inch offset. Ventrac used to make the finish cut mower with the 6-inch offset. Absolutely is awesome for getting up against fence lines and under linear obstacles. They discontinued it because apparently it just wasn't that popular of an attachment. I debated on getting rid of it, but Jim Hutchins recommended, and I think he's right, that because these are no longer made, I should just hang on to it. It does take up some floor space in here, and man, when you see the amount of attachments that I have in this shop, which I think currently is 20, it's a miracle how I fit all this stuff in here. So what I'd like to do now is we'll go into a few different scenarios to show you which type of situation each mower handles best. Okay, so we'll start out with the finish cut mower, and as the name implies, it really does a nice finishing job, and not just on already maintained surfaces. To be fair, I have used the finish cut mower for brush cutting type work going all the way back to when we lived in northern Maine on our old farm estate. Now, at one time that had been used as a potato farm and an apple orchard, and it had not been farmed, and my estimation is about 50 years the fields have been let to grow wild, turning back into wilderness. And when we first bought the place, some of the yard space had been mowed with a zero turn by the previous owner, and other areas that had been yard space were left to grow wild. And those areas were pretty long, and when we first got the Ventrac up to the far north, we had that, oh, I'm getting a call from Jeffrey. Hey, you're back. Bradley. Great. All right, hang on one sec. Yeah, good.
2 hours later.
Okay, so sorry about that. Jeffrey called and had a great conversation about all kinds of stuff, including Ventrac. Always great to have a good conversation with him. Anyway, so back to the finish cut mower. I used that thing in northern Maine, mowing the regular grass and expanding the areas that had started to turn back to wilderness. And you notice I had even taken the deflector shield off of the side. And what that would do is I could bring the mower in from the side to a larger sapling or a small tree, and the tip of that mower blade would nip at it as I swept it in. And I was taking out some pretty sizable trees with this thing. And for what it's worth, that finish cut mower, well, a couple things. It's my oldest attachment that was manufactured in the year 2000, 25 years ago. Thing is absolutely incredible. I have never had to change a single spindle on that machine. And I'll tell you, I have beat that thing. I've bent blades, and still the spindles are great. I did have to change the bearing in the PTO shaft one time, and it's probably my fault. I didn't put enough grease in it one time, or who knows what happened, but I noticed some rattling and just needed to replace that bearing. But other than that, that mower has taken a beating and owes me absolutely nothing. Without having a tough cut at the time, I used the finish cut to go back into those areas and reclaim those, and it worked amazingly well, to a point where the property had become so transformed and so manicured that people from all over would drive by down our little country road just to see the house. They'd stop, take pictures, because the mowed yard space, I would mow in 3 directions, and it truly looked like a ball field or a golf course. Absolutely fantastic. So now we can move on to the tough cut, and we're actually going in the order of the different mowers, in the order that I purchased them. And the tough cut is absolutely an incredible engineering marvel. It's just, the blades on that thing are super thick. And the first few times I had used it, I just was impressed. I mean, for those of you that have used a tough cut and have been into some really thick fields or overgrown areas, especially if it's for customers, they don't realize what's back there. But with the Tough Cut, you find everything. And I've hit, I guess the most solid thing I wound up hitting was an old rear end from a 1920s era Ford truck. It still had the wooden spokes on the end of the axles. The wheels were long gone, the spokes were still there. Ford must have treated them with something, and they lasted a long time. I actually found that in one of my overgrown fields in Maine. Simply amazing. And I checked the blades and there was barely a nick in them. Now you use the Tough Cut blades enough and you hit enough stuff, eventually it starts to take its toll, and it does, but man, those blades are tough. And I tell customers that with the Tough Cut, if I can bend a tree over with the weight of the machine and the mower, I can cut it off. And that's absolutely true. And it's just pretty amazing the stuff that the Tough Cut mower will actually go through. Pretty impressive. So the Tough Cut would excel in areas of very dense vegetation, very tall vegetation, and even saplings and very dense woody material. Now for the Flail. And using the Flail, I found that in the same dense woody conditions that the Tough Cut would excel, the Flail will more or less kind of roll over them, and the knives won't have a chance to cut or engage that woody material. Possibly in part due to the cut height. You can adjust the Flail to a maximum cut height of 5 inches. As far as the Tough Cut, I'm not entirely certain what the maximum cut height is. You have 2 adjustments on that. You have the pins at the back of the Tough Cut, which adjusts the deck height, and then you have the yokes, the casters in the front of the attachment. You could also adjust the height on those. I set my Tough Cut for the lowest possible cutting position because if I don't want to cut as low, I can simply take the hydraulics out of float and raise the Tough Cut to about where I want it. But if I'm cutting too high and I want to cut a little bit lower, you are mechanically limited. Once you have those yokes installed, the only way to change that is by unbolting those and repositioning and rebolting. So the Flail in, say, weedy material. The weedy material, it does excellent, but once you transition into some of the woodier material, you notice that the cut quality starts dropping off pretty drastically. If I had to just choose one mower that had the best all-around capability, both in finer materials and in denser woody materials and saplings, I think the Tough Cut does the best job of bridging the gaps between finer material and heavy dense material. So for what it's worth, that's my 2 cents and my perspective on the 3 different mowers. At some point, I'm also going to be testing the MZ brush cutting mower, Ventrac's newest brush cutting attachment. And I'm looking forward to getting some experience with that and bringing those videos to you guys. So do we use the Tough Cut? Do we use the finish cut mower? Or do we use the fast cut Flail? Which is the best? Well, as is normally the case, there is not a single correct answer. It really depends on the denseness and the type of material that you're cutting through. I put a lot of time and effort into creating these videos. And if you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing to this channel and hitting the notifications bell. And that way, when I upload new amazing Ventrac content, you'll be the first to know. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me in this episode, and we'll see you in the next one.